we're a bit ahead of the game, yet behind the game. What do I mean? We're on Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, and because we have an extra few minutes, so I'd like to fill in a little bit of a gap that we have here on Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. And you'll forgive me if it's a review, but Chazorah on Daf Yomi is also very, very important. So we're up to Nafkale Midasanya, which will count down from the top of Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if there's anyone interested in hearing the shir on Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, you can find it up on YouTube. Nafkale Midasanya. The Gemara has a question now on Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili takes the pasuk Asher Rasa literally, and it means Asher Lo Rasa means that there's only a knas in a case of a woman that was never meureses. If she was at one point meureses, then she's out of the ballpark as far as knas is concerned. And now the Gemara asks, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, how do we know that in the case of Mafate, the payment is 50? And how do we know that in the case of Ones, the payment is Shkolim? And the Gemara answers, Nafkale Midasanya, he derives it from a brisa, Kesef Yishkol Kimor HaBesulos. In the Parsha Mafate, the Torah already refers to Mor HaBesulos. Now, where do we find Mor HaBesulos? Mor HaBesulos is a certain amount of money that's earmarked to pay a Besula, presumably because she experienced an Ones situation. She was raped. And that's what Rabbi Yossi Aglili is going to derive in this brisa from the words Kimor HaBesulos in the Parsha Mafate, that the Parsha Mafate is setting up an analogy to the Parsha of Ones. And that is because the Torah in the Parsha Mafate utilizes the terminology Moar HaBesulos. Moar HaBesulos is a certain set amount of money that's designated to pay a Besula that's not mentioned in the Parsha Mafuta, but rather in the Parsha of Anusa. And not only that, we're going to switch it around the other direction as well. Umar HaBesulos Kazeh. And the Mor HaBesulos that's mentioned in the Parsha of Mafate is equivalent to the Mor HaBesulos in the Parsha of Ones. And that's going to teach me a two-way street, open in both directions, Shkolim and Chamishim. Gemara now asks the question that we've been waiting for the whole time here. Kasha de Rabbi Akiva de Rabbi Akiva. We have a stira between the Mishnah and its version of Rabbi Akiva, as opposed to the Brisa and its version of Rabbi Akiva. In the presentation of our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva maintains that if she was an Arusa, and then she was divorced, and then afterwards she had an onus or a pitui situation, the knas, instead of going to the father in this case, because of the erusin, goes to the girl herself. Whereas Rabbi Akiva in the Bryce is reported as saying that even after erusin, nothing changes at all. And the money accrues to the father. He continues to collect the money for his daughter who's a Nara, even after erusin and gerushin. And the Gemara answers, Trei Tanoi Valiba de Rabbi Akiva. We have two transmissions of the view of Rabbi Akiva, and they're both valid. The Gemara says, but Bishlam Rabbi Akiva the Masnisin lo asi gzer shavu mafkale lekra mi pashte legamre el Rabbi Akiva the Brisa asi gzer shavu mafke mi pashte legamre. How could it be that Rabbi Akiva, as a result of a Gzereshava in the Brisa, is going to completely remove the pasuk from its simple, straightforward shot. We have a principle called Ein Mikra Yotzim V'dei Pshuto. We have to be loyal to Pshuto Shel Mikra. The Torah says that it's a woman asher lo orasa. And now Rabbi Akiva, as recorded in the Brisa, is telling us that it doesn't make a difference whether she was orasa or not orasa. So why did the Torah specify and restrict it to a case of a woman asher lo orasa? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, kribe asher lo arusa. We're going to take the word orasa and we're going to rewrite the vowels, the vocalization of the word, as if it had said arusa. And what it means is that at the time of the onus, when the rape took place, she was not an arusa. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Arusa baskilai. If she's an arusa, I don't need the Torah to tell me that she's not an arusa at the time of the onus. If she was an arusa at the time of the onus, then we apply the principle of Kim Levi the Rabbimine. He's chayav misa for having a relationship with a married woman. We have the sheet of Rabbah, which now is being used by the Gemara as a havamina, and according to Rabbah, we don't apply the principle of Kim Levi the Rabbimine in the case of a knas, because it's a chidush Torah, and therefore we apply both the chiyuv misa and we implement the death penalty, and at the same time we make him pay the knas. And in the havamina, when she was an arusa at the time of the onus, the Torah is telling me to suspend the principle of Kim Levi the Rabbineh, and at the same time that will put him to death. Having a relationship with a married woman will impose the knas. So Gemara says to Rabbah, but what are you going to say according to Rabbah? The Omar Rabbah, in fact, holds like that Havamim, but for Rabbah, it's the Maskana that we suspend the operation of Kim Levi the Rabbineh in the case of a knas. If that be the case, then how are we going to interpret the pasuk Asher lo orasa, Asher lo arusa? And you're going to tell me that Asher lo arusa, because if she's an arusa, then he doesn't pay knas. That's not so, because even if she's an arusa, according to Rabbah, he will pay the knas. And the Gemara answers, Savar luck, Rabbi Akiva de Basnisin. We're going to have to assume that Rabbah holds like the version of Rabbi Akiva as reported by our Mishnah. And Asher lo orasa means that instead of the father collecting the knas, she herself collects the knas in the case of an arusa. Then we don't have the problem of Kim Levi the Rabbineh. And this is where we wanted to start for today officially. Tanu Rabbanon Knosel and me Liavia. The Brisa records two opinions as to who collects and pockets the knas. The first opinion is something that's explicit in the Torah. And we wonder why there's going to be a second dissenting opinion, namely that the father pockets the knas. V'yesh omrim liatzma. What do you mean liatzma? The Torah says, B'nasan le'avia. The Torah says explicitly that the payment is delivered to the father. Liatzma amai. How is it possible to take the pasuk v'nasan ha'ich hashokhev imala v'anara and tell me that she collects the knas? It's the old case that we've been discussing over and over again. She was given to marriage by her father, and after the Erusin, there was a divorce, and then unfortunately she had what she had, the episode that took place. And now we interpret this machlokas recorded in the Brisa in the light of the two versions of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah is of the opinion that the money is collected by the Nara herself. She's no longer in the rishus of her father because she already had Erusin and Gerushin. Whereas The Brisa is of the opinion that Rabbi Akiva never said such a thing, and that even after Erusin and Gerushin, she still has to give the money of the Knas over to her father, goes into his bank account, and he has the rights and the zchus to collect those monies even after Gerushin, Erusin plus Gerushin. And that's the first shita here in this Brisa Knas Alavia. Omar Abaye ba aleha umesa never. Hopefully, she didn't die as a result of the rape, not directly. And she died before what's called Hamada B'Din. In other words, the father did not yet get a chance to put forward his claim and sue the Ma'anis. And in the meantime, Nebuch, she died. Now, I don't know why he's in the mood, the father, after losing his daughter, but okay, so he has lawyers and so forth and so on. And maybe he wants to put up a monument in memory of his daughter, and he wants to collect Hamishim Kesef. I mean, that's a lot of money. But he cannot collect from the Ma'anis. Why? Because the key of keys is not just the moment of Ones, but the moment of Hamada B'Din. And at the time that he sued in court, she was already gone. The monies will be paid to the father of the live Nara, the Lolavi Mesa, but not to the father of Nebuch, a deceased. And the Gemara says, Milsa de Pshita Leila Abaye, mi boy Leila Rav. Rava was never really sure about this. Because after all, at the time of the Ones, she, the Nara, was alive and well. And that's what fixes in stone the Chiyuv Knas. Hamada B'Din is only a technicality in order to be Mavarer Es Hadovar and bring evidence to the effect that this no good scoundrel was Ma'anis, this woman.
So, just pointing out, you said before, it can't be from the action itself that she died, because otherwise he'd be chayiv. Again, we'd have come.
Well, again, I didn't mean that he killed her. You know, I'm saying he was in a state of shock. They sent her to, in America, we would say Bellevue, Nebuch, and they gave her shock treatments. And at the end, you know what I'm saying? I was just trying to be funny to get a laugh out of you, Joe. That's all I was trying to do. Because it's a little bit strange that a man rapes a woman and then she dies. You know, like, is there any connection between the two things? When I was a kid, we used to play Dado. You remember that? You connect the dots. You remember that game? You weren't around. Okay. Yeah. All right. So what's Rava now vacillating about? Boy, Rava. Rava has a suffix. Later on, the Gemara is going to talk about a case where at the time of the rape, she was a Nara, but the Hamada B'Din, the lawsuit, didn't come to the attention of the court until she was a Bogeres. And the Gemara wanders back and forth. Rava vacillates. Who collects the Knas in that case? Should we say that now that she's a Bogeres, she's out of the rishus of her father, that she collects the Knas? Or should we say, no, forget about Hamada B'Din. Hamada B'Din is just a technicality, but the chiyuv to pay Knas was etched in stone at the time of the Ma'aseh Avera, time of Ones. And at that time, Baruch Hashem, she was a Nara and her father had rights to the Knas. And Rava, in that suffix, is now going to fit like a glove in this case of a suffix of Mesa. How so? Yesh baga bekever or ain baga bekever. Let's see what that means. Yesh baga bekever, and that means dibna havi. Okay, now those two words, dibna havi, are going to be very problematic if we take them literally. But what will first, I'll give you a more of a loose translation of these two words, dibna havi, and then we'll give it a literal translation, which is going to bring the Gemara to a problem and a brick wall that's going to force us to reinterpret the words dibna havi. But dibna havi, in a figurative way, means that the father is out of the picture. Why? Because she is a Bogeres. What does that mean? She's a Bogeres. She died at the age of 12 and a quarter. But before Hamada B'Din, before it got to the courts, 3 months plus passed, and she became a bogeres posthumously. And that knocks the father out of the box because he has no rights to collect any money, any funds that are coming into a bogeres. The Torah only gives him rights to a nara. Or ein bager bekever. What's ein bager bekever? She died at the age of 12 and a quarter. She was a nara, and she remains a nara. And therefore the father has rights to collect Behamana Bedin even 3+ months down the line because she remains a Nara. And the father's rights to collect his daughter, his Nara's Knas, are frozen at the moment that she dies. Now, wait a second. This was very nice if you take the Gemara figuratively, but let's take the Gemara literally and translate it word for word. It says that if yesh bagar bekever, not only does the Gemara point out, and Rav and his Suffolk point out that the father is out of the picture, but it says dibnahav. Do you see those two words in the Gemara? Dibnahav. What does that mean, dibnahav?
Sorry. What does it matter whether she died or not? Even if she's alive, would you have the same question? Or
no, if she's alive, then clearly there's a knas, and clearly the father's out of the picture. Who therefore will collect that knas? She does. She collects the knas.
Okay.
But in a case where she died, obviously she cannot collect the knas.
Okay. So
who will collect the knas if you hold yesh bagar bekever? And the answer is, and if you take the Gemara literally, dibnahav. So she has a son. And this is going to take us back to the Rashi that Bobby pointed out in the last year on, when was it, on Friday? Umi ma'abra? How could it be that we take this price so literally, or Rava literally, and dibnahavi, that she's a nara and she has a child? And she become pregnant? For Tani Rabbi Bibi, this is not a political statement here. Rabbi Bibi, Kame de Rav Nachman, Sholosh Noshim Mishamshos B'mo. There are 3 women who are permitted to use contraception. And by the way, the use of contraception in this particular case is not lechatchila. You know, the Gemara didn't have the sophisticated methods of contraception that we have today in terms of technology, in terms of shots and whatnot. But we're talking about a very kind of old-fashioned method of contraception called a moch. I think in English it loosely translates as a sponge, or maybe in a more sophisticated context, a diaphragm. And this is not something that we're very happy about. Why? Because it somehow interferes with the normal flow, if I can borrow that term, of an intimate relationship. So we'll rely on a kula if necessary. Now, what makes it necessary to allow a leniency of a woman using a moch? One of 3 cases, all of which have a common denominator. And that is a certain danger. Now, to whom is there danger? So let's go through it. Elohim, number 1, Tana, and that's going to be a danger to her, to the woman, the wife herself. Number 2, Me'uberes, and that's going to be a danger to the fetus, as we'll soon see. And then Menika, which is going to be a danger to the nursing baby. And please keep in mind that today you could debate back and forth how critical is nursing, but back in the time of the Gemara, nursing was almost pikuach nefesh. They didn't have Materna. Well, I don't know the Canadian version of Materna, or maybe Materna is a Canadian company, I don't know. But they didn't have that kind of stuff back in the day. So nursing was absolutely critical. Katana, Shematis Aber Vitamus. Now, most of the Rishonim, with the exception of Rashi, that's Bobby's Rashi from Daf, what was it, Lamed Ches, no, Lamed Zion. Most Rishonim would say that you have to put an extra word in the Gemara. You read it, Shema Tisaber V'Shema Tamus. She may become pregnant and she might die. And this is based on the Gemara in Masechet Yevamos that comes to the conclusion that there have been cases of a Ketana who actually gave birth to a viable child. But it's very, very unlikely. What's more likely is that Nebuch, as a result of the pregnancy and the harm done to this young girl's body, she will die. But we don't want her to become pregnant. Number two, Muberes. She's already pregnant, and believe it or not, Chazal understood, and you could look on Google and see if you can find anyone on Google who agrees with this biology, that a woman who's pregnant can become pregnant a second time through a subsequent intimacy. And what's going to happen when she becomes pregnant a second time? Shemetasa ubra sandal. Her first fetus, her first pregnancy, we always say kol hakodem zacha, is going to get almost destroyed by the new pregnancy. And again, there are details here that are gory. I don't want to go into them. You'll decide if you want to go into them on your own, what exactly the word sandal means in this case, and so forth and so on. Menika shemetigmol espinna. Once a woman becomes pregnant, it's very difficult for her to nurse. And if she terminates her nursing to the newborn baby, that might endanger the life of the baby. Ezoi ktana. At what age do we allow a young girl, to use a moch? In other words, at what age do we feel that based on the science of our day, the science of the Talmudic times, she might indeed become pregnant? And as a result of the pregnancy, she could endanger her life. If she's less than 11, pochus mikan, then the Yisrael kan, mishamesh kedarkav olechas. We're not going to be lenient and allow for the interference, whatever level of interference there is in the sexual act as a result of using a moch. Why? Because if she's less than 11 years old, the chances are she won't become pregnant. And if she's more than 12 years old, if she does become pregnant, she'll be able to carry to full term, and her life is not in danger. But you see again and again how the Gemara is looking for a matir to allow tashmish b'moch. It's not so simple. And we'll only do it when there is a pressing need. And in the cases of less than 11 or more than 12, there's no pressing need. So the whole business about a katana using a moch is going to last for 1 year. We don't want to use a moch. We don't want a moch. No moch. Do you have it, Rabosai? We don't want a moch. That's the sheet of Chachamim. What do you mean you don't want a moch? You're going to allow this dangerous situation, whether it's to the woman herself, whether it's to the fetus in her body, whether it's to the newborn baby that's suckling from her mother's breast. What are you talking about? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to have rachamim. God protects the innocent. One of the most complicated halachic analyses is this principle of Shomer P'soim Hashem. And the basic rule is, again, in a very, very general, superficial way, is that whenever the normal way is this is the way we live our lives, then God will protect us. We won't consider it a dangerous situation if this is part of normal behavior. So Rav Moshe Feinstein was matir smoking until the Surgeon General's report, if I remember correctly, because the Shomer P'soim Hashem, everybody smokes. I remember when I took my faher to get accepted to Yeshiva University, I'm not going to mention his name, but he was a Gadol B'Yisrael. He used to smoke half cigarettes cut every cigarette into half. And he wouldn't throw it out until his fingers were yellow. I thought he was going to go up and smoke. And when I got to Eretz Yisrael and I learned in a certain yeshiva here in Israel, I went up to the Ezras Noshim. There was a vilon, I opened the vilon, you couldn't see anything. The whole base medrash was one cloud and it wasn't Ananya covered. So Rav Moshe Paskin, Shomer Psoyim Hashem. So it's normal for a wife to have a relationship with her husband and God will protect her. That's the sheep of the Chachamim. We see very carefully, very clearly here that it's almost unheard of for a katana to give birth to a baby girl. And now we talk about a nara. So she would probably have to have gotten pregnant. The conception would have taken place when she was a katana. And then she would have to give birth when she was a nara during that 6-month period between 12 and 12 and a half. So Gemara says, if he came at the abrakshi nara, why not say the following? That maybe she didn't become pregnant and carry a full 9 months, which means that she became pregnant as a katana, which is very unlikely to be able to carry the full term and have a son who would inherit her. But perhaps she became pregnant as a nara. But wait a minute, she died as a nara. That would mean that her pregnancy could last maximum 6 months. So the Gemara says, "V'olida kishinara b'shisa yachi mika yolda." Do we have such a situation that a woman carries 6 months? Today, by the way, we know that this is possible. But in the time of the Gemara, it was considered impossible for a woman to give birth to a viable child that would survive after 6 months of pregnancy. When you get to Narus, which means she's 12 and a day, and she has Simone Narus, you just simply look at the calendar, you fast forward 6 months, and she becomes a Bogeres. There's no need for anything else to happen. You just simply count and calculate 6 months. And don't argue with me, says the Gemara. You'll argue with me, but Siru the Leka Tfeika, maybe what Shmuel meant was that there's a minimum of 6 months. But there's a maximum that goes even beyond 6 months. But again, now the Gemara is assuming that there's some sort of simanim that would clinch her bagus. The Gemara doesn't even bother going into detail about this because the Gemara completely rejects this Havamina Mikol Vacho in its roots. Ha Ela Ka'ama. Shmuel added the word Ella to tell you that it's exactly 6 months. It doesn't depend upon any factors whatsoever, just the passage of time. So therefore, the Gemara now strikes from the record the 2 words ulibnahav. Ella hachi kami boile. Now we go back to the suffix of Rava and we reformulate it. And we're talking about a case where the onus took place when she was a nara. The father did not get a chance to be Mamid Bidin, to sue the rapist until his daughter never died. Yesh baga bekever. If she became a bogeres bekever, which knocks off whom? The father, he's knocked out of the ring. Ha'av. And the Masechet adds another few words, and he says after hufka is chutz shel av b'knas zeh is ha'ones lo yechuyev l'shalem klal. That's what Rabbi was wanting. The onus is off. The ma'anis is off the hook. Why? Because she's dead. She has no heirs. The only one who could possibly collect the knas is the father. And now we're holding Yesh Baga B'Kever. If we hold Yesh Baga B'Kever, she's already Bogeres. The father's out of the picture.
Why doesn't the father collect as an heir?
Good question. Just 1 second. No. we're missing the point. What we're saying now is that if yesh bager bekever, then we go back to the drasha. Who was it? Of Abaye. Velola via Mesa. Just 1 second. Let me see if anybody says that. Well, no, he says something different. I had a whole lumpus here, but the Masechet I even underlined it, but I forgot about it. There's no Yerush on a Knas.
Right, it's Rashi. Rashi says it. Rashi says.
Rashi says it, so I quoted the name of Masechet, and the Masechet quotes the name of Rashi. So you could decide whether you want to quote the Masechet or Rashi. Yeah, you're right. It's sloppy scholarship here.
Anyway, maybe her brother will get it, not her, by Yerusha.
Oh, so the answer is there's no Knas, there's no Yerushan Knas. Now, if we want to study Eish Nochlin, we'll have to go through the sugyas there and figure out why there's no Yerushan Knas. I have a feeling, just Libi Omerli, that Knas is called Roi and not Nuchsak. Are you familiar with those terms? Do you ever learn Eish Nochlin? All right.
So Joe, question then her son also shouldn't, well, that's what we're saying now. The son doesn't collect because there's no son.
Yeah, but even the first question, that why would her son get it all in the first place?
At that point, yeah. In other words, also it should be the question of Roy or Muksuk should mean that the son wouldn't collect either, even if there was a son.
Does Rashi address this? Let's just read the Rashi. Poka of. Where's the Rashi now? Poka of. Poka is Tvias Avin. Uknas le Mamun. So it's a Risholi Avia B'Torsi Yerusha. Okama Delo Gavte.
At this point, the Gemara has eliminated the son also because he can't be there. So
no, but Joe's question is excellent. I mean, why do you have to bother going through a whole somersault in the air that she couldn't have given birth? Why don't you say there's no Yerusha to a Knas? Again, I just don't want to lose the they give me a certain amount of time here. I'll just take a quick peek here on Daf Lamed Tesam and Aleph. I have something called Biure Rashi. 1 second. Lamed Tesam and Aleph. Let's just see. And the Dibra Maskell we said was Poka Av.
You wouldn't say that the son's talking about the son who's the son of the action
from the anus.
I don't know if would that make any difference? I don't see why that.
If it's not Yerusha, it would be considered like he's like
he has no time now.
All right, I don't know. Let's go on. O Dilma ain baga b'kever, which means that the status of the Nara is frozen at the time that she dies, and she's always a Nara, v'lo pokav, and therefore the father could collect. So again, Abaye had a special Gzeras HaKosuv that there's no Knas in the case of Avia Mesa. Rava didn't have that. He was only wondering whether or not there is a status of Bogeres to a woman, a Nara, after her death. And according to Rava, simply what happens is if you hold Yesh Baga Bekever, the Knas falls between the cracks. There's no one to collect the Knas because there's no Yerush on Knas. The father is out of the picture because the father never collects Knas for Bogeres. Ravashi Boile Hachi, he had a different formulation of Rava's suffix, Misa Osa Baigus. Maybe at the time that she dies, she becomes a Bogeres. And according to the first side in Ravashi's suffix, immediately at that moment when she dies, the father loses his rights to collect the Knas. And again, we're going to have to add what we said before, that there's no Yerusha on a Knas. Oh, ein osa bagus. Or shall we say no? The father continues to have rights to collect his daughter's Knas, as long as you hold ein baga b'kever, or alternatively, if he gets quick to the draw, to be toveh the Knas before that extra 3 months that we spoke about passes by. And here we have Teku. Again, there's a long discussion here in Nachronim, but I'm going to have to beg you, because if I get messed up here, it's not going to be good. Okay. Ba aleha vinis arsa mahu. What happens if you hold like that shita, that her din changes after Erison, as far as the father is concerned? And we have the two versions of Rabbi Akiva, the Mishnah and the Brisa. And now, immediately after the onus took place, she became an arusa. So we have no problem with Kimle the Rabbi, obviously. She was not an arusa at the time of the Erison, but who gets to collect the knas? Shall we say that the Nara herself gets to collect the knas, which means that with Erison, she leaves the rishus of her father? Again, that's a very difficult position to maintain, but at least as far as knas is concerned, we might fit it into the context of knas. And this would, again, reflect the shita of Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah, that after Erison, the father loses his rights to collect knas. Or should we say no? That since at the time of the onus, she was Bershus Ha'av, and she didn't leave the Rishus Ha'av as far as collecting knas is concerned, because immediately with the Maisa onus, the knas is frozen in place, and the father gets rights to the knas.
Why don't we look at the time of Amana
Who's
B'din?
talking? I hear a voice. I don't.
Huh?
Who's talking here?
Me. Hold on.
Who's me? Oh, there you are.
Okay. Why don't we look at when the Bezdin awards the knas? Why are we looking at the time frame as to when it happens?
So we want to know what exactly is Bezdin doing. Is the purpose of Bezdin what we call clarative? Clarative meaning to clarify that so-and-so has a chiyuv to pay money. Like, for example, in the case of Alva, Bezdin only plays a role of birur. Or is Bezdin actually creating the knas? Like, for example, we have halacha moed v'knas potter. That's because Bezdin creates the knas. So Rava is vacillating on the following question. At the time of the onus, she was a pnuya. Then, before Hamada B'din, right, time T2 in the middle, she became an arusa. Mahu, to whom does the knas accrue? Shall we say that through Erison, she leaves the rishus of her father as far as knas is concerned, which would reflect the sheet of Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah, that with Erison, the father is out of the picture as far as knas is concerned. Again, be very careful, because this is not a universal halach. In Nedarim, as we'll see, the father still could be made for a Nedarim, even though she's an arusa. But in any event, as far as knas, the Torah said, Asher lo arasa. And after Erison, the father's out of the picture. That's Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah. Or shall we say no? That since Bezdin, according to the second side in Rava's suffix, is only playing a role of evidence, of establishing facts on the ground, but the Maisa Machayev, that action, that episode that generates the Chiyuv Knas, is the onus, then at the moment that the onus took place, the father already clamps down on his legal rights to collect the Knas. Amalei, Abai responds to Rava, Miksiv v'nosan lavia nara sher lo arusa. Does the Torah say that the father's rights are contingent on the fact that she's lo arusa? That's not what it says in the Torah. If it would have said lo arusa, it means the very moment that she became an arusa, the father is out of the picture. And then clearly the answer to Rava's question would be that she collects her knas rather than her father. But instead, the Torah says asher lo orasa. Orasa, not arusa, but orasa. And what that means is that if at the time of Nesina, because again, that pasuk says v'nasan, etc. At the time of Nesina, she's lo rasa. But now we're talking about a case where she wasn't married, then divorced, then she had the onus, but rather she had the onus when she was a pnuya before the marriage. So therefore, Abai comes to the conclusion that the father could collect the knas, even though she is now an arusa, and that's even according to Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah. So Rava turns to Abai and says, "Utamech, according to your logic, that the knas is always a monetary right of the father, as long as she was a nara pnuya at the time of the onus, is hadesanya." How are you going to interpret the following brisa? So what happened is, not only after the erisin, after the onus, did she have erisin, but she also had nesuin. She was taken into the chuppah. And in this case, the brisa says, knasali atzma, she collects the knas. Now, wait a second, let's apply your biblical exegesis, Abaye. Let's be consistent. Does the Torah say anywhere that if she's in a suah that's a tarti disasri to the father's rights to collect the knas? It doesn't say that. And according to your logic, Abaye, we should come to the conclusion that since the onus, the Maisa onus, will fix in stone the father's rights, again, assuming she's a nar, right? The father's rights to collect her knas, then what difference does it make if she's in a suah? Why is it that within a suah, the father loses, he forfeits his rights? The answer is because the suah terminates and undermines the father's rishus over his daughter. So why not go a step further and apply that even in Eretz? Says Abaye, what kind of a tushtel? You're comparing Eretz to Nesuin? Did you not pass the course called Ishus 1.1? Achi hashta hasam over there in the case of a Nesua. Hoel ubagrus motzia mishasav, Nesuin motzia mishasav. The father terminates his rights over his daughter, because the pasuk says binu re'el savia with bagrus, and so too with Nesuin. Once he gives her hand to Nesuin, he is out of the picture entirely. For example, if she takes a neder, the husband has exclusive rights to be made for the neder. Without the father whatsoever, he's not in the picture after Nesuin. And therefore, let's equate bagrus with Nesuin. In both cases, she leaves the domain of her father. Bagrus ba leu bagro liatzma, Nesuin ba oleo v'nises liatzma. Just like in the case of Bogeres, the halacha is that even though the onus took place when she was a nara, the father is out of the picture with her bagus, and therefore she will collect and pocket her own knas. So too in the case of Nesua, once there was Nesuin, even though the Maisa onus took place when she was a pnuya, nevertheless with Nesuin, she leaves the rishus of the father, and clearly the knas is collectible by the daughter. What does that have to do with Erison? Does a woman leave the domain and the rishus of her father with Erison? That's not so. Open up to the Masechet Nedarim, the 10th perek, and you'll see that after Erison, if she takes a neder, then he who the baila varusa is mefir nedareah. The father plays a role in our first nedarim. In fact, if he does not make for the neder biyom shamo, then the neder is valid. But nara murasa v'u baila mefir nedareah. And that leads us to the Mishnah here on the bottom of Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph. Hamefate nosein shlosha dvarim va'ones arba. So as we go along, we'll see that there's an element of chavala which is present and has to be taken care of for compensation purposes in the case of an ones, but it's missing, it's absent in the case of a mafata. In the case of ones, I'm sorry, let's start with the case of mafata that has only 3, and then ones has 4. In the case of mafata, is no same boshes. He has to pay for boshes. Why is he paying for boshes? She was a consenting adult. But the answer is because who collects the boshes? She's a nara, her father collects the boshes. So she has no right of mechila on the boshes collection, the compensation that belongs, accrues to her father. And the same is true of pagam. Pagam means how much she was devaluated on the shuk. I don't want to marry a girl who's already been had. Uknas, and then he's got to pay 50 shkolim. But the Chiddush of our Mishnah is that in addition to the 50 shkolim, he's got to pay boshes upagam. Mosif olav ha'onesh nosin es ha'afas hatzar. And we're going to have a whole sugya here. Does a woman, in a case of pitui, suffer any sort of tsar, such that her father, when she's a nara, could collect the payment of tsar? But the Mishnah says no. Obviously, the Mishnah assumes that since she was a consenting adult, as we called her, therefore there's no tsar. I'm not sure exactly why the Mishnah had to add this. The Tiferes Yisrael in Mishnayos says that Li'olam, the Mishnah wants to emphasize Li'olam Eina Mafata Nosei Tsar. In other words, there's an objective, legal, halachic status of pitui being potter from tsar. Even if Lu Yitzui, you would prove that she had tsar through the pitui, she would not be able to collect the tsar. I don't know, but the Mishnah seems to be quite superfluous. What else? Is there any other difference between ones and mafat? Ones no semiyat. The payment of the knas of 50 shekel is immediate because he has to marry him, whether he likes it or not. But mafata, he has to make a decision whether he wants to marry him. And if Lu Yitzui marries her, he doesn't pay knas. But yotzi means if he decides that he's not going to marry her, then he has to pay the knas. What else is the difference between ones and mafata? Ones shosa batzitzo. He's got to drink in that very vessel that he polluted. And it doesn't matter what she looks like. She might be a hinkadiker, she what do you call it in English? She's lame. You remember the machlokas back on Daf Yud Zayin, she pays Sil Beit Shammai. All those cases, she's a mukashchin. I don't know what she looks like. Gosh.
What about her? What if she doesn't want him?
Right. It's all conditional on the other 2 members of the party. There are 3 members of the party. One of them, it's even Balkarcha. The other 2, they have to sign on. Number 1, it's the Ma'anes Balkarcha. Number 2, we need the consent of the father and the daughter. Now, if the father objects and vetoes, then it seems, and the Gemara is going to spend a lot of time working on this, that even if she wants to marry this no good schlub of a rapist, nevertheless, her father has veto power, and we're going to have to see why and how. Mefate? He doesn't want to marry this girl. She's lame. She's blind. She's deaf. I don't know what she is. She's got alamilis. She's a mukashchin. Is rotza lahotzi motzi. Again, the Gemara is going to reinterpret that to mean that if he wants to, he could reject her. Kesad shosa batzisa afili chigeres, afili hisuma, afili mukashchin. This would not be the woman he would want to marry, but you're no good schlub of a scoundrel. You're a rapist. We don't have, the Torah has very low tolerance for a rapist. Although we're going to see in the Gemara one kula for a rapist, he doesn't have to pay the ksuba. But okay, that's a different story. Nimta badvar aveira. Now we get into a sugya which is called Esei Docha Losas. The Ones married this girl, and now the Torah says he's not allowed to live with her. I don't know, this raises eyebrows, like, I don't want to say these words, but, she was raped, and I don't know what happened. Either she was a kind of a loose woman to begin with, or she became a little bit loose afterwards. I don't know. But it turns out that testimony has it that she had an extramarital relationship. He's not allowed to live with her, but yet he has a mitzvah to live with her. She's a mamzeres. He's not allowed to marry a mamzeres. No essay dophalosis. And the Gemara is going to get into a mimonach. If this drasha is telling me that the essay doesn't override the losas, says, so we should derive from this a universal conclusion that there's no such thing as essay dochalosas. I don't know what we're going to do with kalayim b'tzitzis. Or we're going to say the following, that this is not really a drasha gemura, but the Gemara is giving an asmachta, but really it means there's no essay dochalosa in this case, and the Gemara is going to rack its brains to try to figure out why there's no essay dochalosa. Tsar demai. What exactly is the tsar here that she suffered? Amar Avur de Shmuel, this is begeder dok v'tishkach, meaning we're going to learn what it says here, the name of Avur de Shmuel, and then we're going to forget it. You're going to have to scratch it from the record. Tsar is chavata al gabi karka. The rapist took her and threw her down on the ground. Maskifla Rab Zera Elamiyata Chavata Al Gabi Shirayim Hachinami de Potur. You're going to tell me that Tsar only means Chavat Al Gabi Karka, but he was very soft with her. He lowered her down to a mattress. If you can say maybe he doesn't pay tsar because she doesn't suffer tsar, there must be another tsar because it says in a brisa, Reb Shimon Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon Ones Einem Mishamis Tsar. Mipneisha Sofa Litzar Tachas Bail. Now this is the unique shita, the dissenting view of Reb Shimon ben Yehuda. The Chachamim are going to object. And according to Reb Shimon, there's no chiyuv tsar in the case of ones.
I'm sorry. Only men could have written this.